Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named The Last Ship, Season 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Picking up right after the small-scale mutiny from last season, the police chief and his men have taken control of the missile destroyer. At the last possible moment, just before the biologist Dr. Hamada led a search, Dr. Scott managed to hide the crucial primordial strain in her medical kit. A brave sailor told the scatterbrain and his fellow to meet in the storeroom, saying he'd go on ahead. Before the scatterbrain could even react, the brave sailor leaped into the sea amidst a hail of gunfire, his whereabouts unknown. Dr. Scott went to treat Quincy's injuries, and Exo Mike discovered the strain in her medical kit. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Green gave the Master Chief a quick bandage. Captain Chandler and the others had also made it to the shore, but they couldn't get back to the ship. Chandler decided to go rescue Dr. Scott, but he was outnumbered. He resolved to first cut off the power supply of Lieutenant Alicia's mother, Granderson, who was the former deputy assistant to the President for National Security Affairs. Chandler's father, the children, and the injured Master Chief found a place to hide. The brave sailor snuck back onto the ship, unseen by anyone, and secretly raised the temperature inside. Another fellow was the first to notice something was wrong and knew the sailor had succeeded, quickly passing the word to the others. Meanwhile, Tex, traveling alone, encountered a young man who initially mistook him for one of Granderson's men. After clearing up the misunderstanding, the young man exposed Granderson's true nature. Dr. Hamada searched everywhere but couldn't find the primordial strain. For the time being, Dr. Scott used a hemostat to stop Quincy's massive bleeding. It was impossible to perform surgery on the bridge. The moment the clamp was released, Quincy would die in seconds. An enraged police chief came to demand the location of the strain, ordering them to wake Quincy up for questioning. Chandler and his team disguised themselves as corpses and body transporters to infiltrate the power plant, which was a hellish scene reminiscent of the Auschwitz concentration camp. The three of them then eliminated everyone in the plant and took control. In the process, they also discovered an undercover operative sent by the warlord. The ship grew hotter. The chief engineer negotiated with the police chief, eventually trading her help in lowering the temperature for the chance to sit in the mess hall. The cook, with his large frame, stood like a wall at the entrance, blocking anyone from seeing what was happening behind him. With the chief engineer's help, the scatterbrain and his fellow managed to escape. After learning about the situation, Tex returned to Granderson's territory, posing as a civilian to apply for a security job. Led by the undercover agent, Chandler met with the warlord. After clearing up any misunderstandings, the warlord explained his plan. They decided to attack Granderson's base that night. Chandler pointed out that Granderson's men were regular soldiers and a direct assault would fail. When the warlord asked for a better idea, Chandler proposed a plan. His people would cut the power, drawing the main police force to the power plant. This would reduce the number of guards at the base and on his ship, ensuring success for both of them. The police chief noticed Dr. Scott and sensed something was off. He went to search her bag, but he found nothing. The doctor was startled, but Mike had a mischievous grin on his face. The scatterbrain and his fellow rendezvoused with the brave sailor, grabbed hammers and crowbars from a storeroom, and went to stir up trouble. The police found a family photo in Quincy's quarters and captured his wife to threaten him into surrendering the strain. Quincy, a true hero, told them that he had indeed hidden it, but they would never find it. He then removed the hemostat himself, making the ultimate sacrifice. Dr. Hamada discovered from medical records that the sidekick girl was pregnant. The police chief then locked the most defiant crew member, Mike, in the chart room. They seized the sidekick girl, but unexpectedly there was a small door in the chart room and Mike successfully escaped. With Quincy dead, Granderson wanted to see Dr. Scott to ask about the strain's whereabouts. During the transport, a familiar man appeared and successfully took out the guards. The researcher next to Dr. Scott had already been turned and stayed behind to deal with the bodies. Dr. Scott asked Tex why he came back, and he replied that he missed her and came to check on her. Just as he was about to escort her out, they saw that the sidekick girl had been captured. Dr. Scott realized they must have discovered her pregnancy and intended to use the baby's stem cells to create a cure. She and Tex decided to stay and rescue the sidekick girl. Meanwhile, the warlord gave Chandler a tour of his underground kingdom, explaining that a surface attack was impossible, but they had dug tunnels right under Granderson's feet without her knowledge. He hoped Chandler's people at the power plant could hold out for as long as possible. Over at the lab, the sidekick girl was tied up and in grave danger. Just as Dr. Hamada was about to perform an amniocentesis on the sidekick girl, the warlord's team signaled they were ready. Chandler had Burke send a signal to Lieutenant Green, who cut the power. Dr. Hamada was interrupted, and a confused Granderson used her radio to ask the power plant what was happening. Lieutenant Green just swore at her. Having never been spoken to like that, Granderson flew into a rage and ordered all police to the power plant, even recalling some from the ship, demanding they turn the man into Swiss cheese. Lieutenant Alicia took the opportunity to escape. As skilled as the police were, they were no match for a combat unit. The power outage threw the entire building into chaos, and the police in the operating room were also redeployed. Dr. Hamada prepared to perform the surgery by lamplight as police left the base for the power plant. The warlord blew a hole in the floor, creating a passage into Granderson's stronghold. Dr. Hamada's assistant, a woman with a conscience, was moved by the sidekick girl and untied one of her hands. The sidekick girl grabbed a large syringe and stabbed Dr. Hamada in the chest, taking him down. Just then, Tex and Dr. Scott arrived in time to save her. The police chief received orders to pull his police forces back from the warship. The Scatterbrain and 2 others arrived at the armory just as the police were being redeployed, allowing the 3 of them to easily acquire weapons and gear. In the mess hall, the cook got his hands on a dinner knife, and it was passed from person to person as they all secretly cut their restraints. Mike made his way to the communications room, which had surveillance monitors the police had overlooked. Seeing the other fellows on the monitors, Mike's confidence soared. He used the hallway lights to send them a signal. One showed the night vision goggles to the camera, and Mike instantly understood. The moment the trio entered the mess hall, he cut the lights. In a single second, they neutralized the guards. They then distributed weapons to everyone, and the full-scale counterattack began. Chandler's father's hiding place was discovered by 2 of Granderson's thugs. The formidable old man proved he hadn't lost his touch, disarming one with his bare hands and, with the Master Chief's help, taking out both enemies. Chandler regrouped with Tex and the others and learned from Dr. Scott that Quincy had sacrificed himself. Chandler then had Dr. Scott and the sidekick girl escorted to safety. At the power plant, Lieutenant Green held off 100 men by himself. After running out of ammunition, he retreated from the plant and called for backup. The Master Chief received the message. Chandler's father told him to go help his comrade, reminding him of the skills he had just witnessed. The Master Chief then went to pick up Lieutenant Green. By this time, Granderson's men had restored power. The Master Chief and Lieutenant Green arrived at Granderson's base, where Alicia had been accidentally shot by her mother's men while trying to escape. Alicia told Chandler she had no idea her mother was a monster. Chandler said he knew and sent her underground to safety. With the entire crew working together, the police were no match for the military. The Navy quickly retook most of the missile destroyer, but a police helicopter was still circling overhead. At that moment, the brave sailor showed his might again, braving a hail of bullets to shoot down the police helicopter. The warlord fought his way to Granderson's office. Usually it's the villain who dies from talking too much, but this time it was the warlord who was killed. On the bridge, the police chief sensed things were going wrong. He opened the chart room and, sure enough, Mike was gone. Following the escape route, the police chief also reached the communications room and a battle between the 2 began. The 193-centimeter tall man fought the 193-pound heavy man. It was an even match at first, but Mike finally ended the fight by striking the police chief with a fire axe. Mike and his crew had finally reclaimed the missile destroyer. He broadcast a message to the shore, telling Granderson's forces to give up their resistance and surrender immediately, or face the wrath of the United States Navy. Chandler found the dying warlord, who used his last breath to say that Granderson was on the roof. On the rooftop, Granderson was waiting for a helicopter to evacuate. Chandler arrived and told her to surrender her weapon, and she would not be harmed. When Granderson ordered her men to shoot, Chandler told them that he had over 200 more sailors just as fierce as he was, and he bet they wouldn't dare to fire. He reminded them they had heard the broadcast. His ship had been retaken by his XO, and he advised them not to be foolish. Chandler's commanding presence defeated the police with words alone. Granderson ordered them to shoot, but no one listened to her smelly bullshit. Chandler told her that her own men had shot her daughter, proving she was a murderer who would even kill her own people. He declared that his wife, Quincy, his crew, and the people at the power plant were all blood debts she had to answer for. Granderson tried to justify herself, recounting her military service in North Africa and her injuries on Utah Beach, proclaiming her loyal service. Chandler dismissed it all as irrelevant, reminding her that he had given her the cure, yet she still chose this path, having become addicted to killing. He demanded she surrender, order her men to stand down, shut down the stadium, and call off the helicopter. Seeing that all was lost, Granderson used her radio to order her forces to surrender, then injected herself with poison, committing suicide. Chandler, Dr. Scott, and the others returned to to the ship. Mike produced the primordial strain he had hidden and gave it to Dr. Scott. The scene flashes back to 13 days ago. On a Florida beach, a group of survivors is living, and recently a new, healthy refugee has washed ashore. That's right, it's the Russian evil scientist Soren. After dealing with Granderson, Chandler led a team to the White House. The place was deserted and in ruins. The bunker wouldn't open and no one responded. Granderson's lab had begun mass-producing the cure, and word had spread. Cars and boats arrived daily to collect it. The missile destroyer prepared to transport some scientific personnel to the naval station Norfolk in Virginia to see if the facilities there were suitable for producing the cure. Chandler retrieved some hard drives from the White House. After decryption, they found important data, including a 9-week-old infection map that could be used to estimate the current situation. There was also a video file from the Secretary of the Navy. In it, the Secretary stated that whoever was watching this video, whether American or foreign, was now part of the regional laboratory network system. He explained that a Navy warship was searching for the raw materials to produce a cure, and if they succeeded, the labs receiving this video were to cooperate with the Navy in its production. Their locations were kept strictly confidential, and the video was accompanied by a communication cipher for contacting each other via encrypted satellite. He stressed the need for strict secrecy, proper protection, and the preservation of their personnel. The data contained a list of over 20 labs, both domestic and foreign, which Chandler's team began contacting one by one. They managed to reach 4 labs in the US and 2 in Europe. The lab in Florida happened to be run by Dr. Scott's mentor. Dr. Scott was thrilled to connect with him and share the good news. Unsurprisingly, Soren poisoned all the survivors on the Florida beach, took some supplies, and casually departed. Dr. Scott found a moment to see Tex and mentioned she heard he was staying. Tex confirmed it, saying they couldn't manage without him. Besides, their journey south was on his way, and the food on board was good. When Dr. Scott asked why he was heading south, Tex admitted that he had lied about being a virgin. He has a 14-year-old daughter who lives with her mother, and he hasn't seen them in 3 years. As they neared Norfolk, XO Mike briefed everyone on their mission. They would deploy 6 shore parties, prioritizing personnel who were from the local area. Their 2 tasks were to rescue survivors and contact their own families. Crew members from other regions would have to wait. Chandler's ship docked, and fortunately, the base was occupied by a unit of Navy SEALs who had maintained their military discipline and order. As fellow sailors, the handover went smoothly. The SEAL team leader explained the situation to Chandler. They had also just arrived. In addition to the SEALs, they had gathered 34 service members from different branches along the way. Chandler mentioned that the records showed a biological lab at the base. The SEAL leader confirmed there used to be one, but it had been completely moved by someone unknown before they arrived. Additionally, the SEAL leader had organized local search and rescue and peacekeeping operations, ensuring the safety of nearby survivors. Chandler gathered the surviving pilots and tasked them with flying the data and scientific personnel to the labs in the northern US and Europe to help with cure production. All available resources were mobilized in a passionate and uplifting effort, and it seemed as if the world was suddenly getting better. Subsequently, Chandler's shore parties began their missions. The results were mixed. The sidekick girl found her mother in a refugee camp, a truly heartwarming moment. They immediately vaccinated the survivors in the camp, and the brave sailor helped restore their power. The girl prepared to return to the ship. Her mother-in-law gave her son-in-law a kiss and told him to take care of her daughter and the baby. The girl asked how she knew everything. Her mother replied that she knew her daughter inside and out. The girl promised to return in 6 weeks to rest for her pregnancy. Mike, however, only found some of his family's belongings. In the end, for the sake of saving the world, he stopped his search, left a note and the cure at his home, and returned to the ship. The chief engineer's fate was even more tragic. Her entire family was gone, and she returned to the ship early. Chandler also went home with his family. That evening, they had a family meeting. Chandler explained that his ship had become famous, attracting the attention of both good and bad people. Having his family on board was too dangerous and would affect his judgment. His son accused him of abandoning them again. Chandler clarified that he had decided to resign to focus on taking care of them. However, his daughter spoke up, questioning whether her mother would want him to be a stay-at-home dad before his work was done. She advised him to reconsider. The next day, as Chandler was cleaning the yard, his father approached him. He told his son that he didn't raise him to rake leaves at home. He asked if Chandler didn't think the ship succeeded entirely because of his command. To leave in the middle of a fight was desertion. Chandler asked if they didn't need him and what would happen if he didn't come back. Chandler's father reminded him that he wasn't the only one who had to sacrifice family for a mission. He told him to think of the sacrifices of revolutionary heroes. Everyone who saves the world has to leave their family behind. When Chandler noted that at least they still had wives, Chandler's father told him not to feel guilty. He took responsibility for Chandler's wife's death, saying he never should have let her go into the city, but now was not the time for guilt. Whether he liked it or not, history had chosen him. He was Noah, Noah, and the missile destroyer was his ark. Deeply moved, Chandler decided to complete his mission. When the shore leave ended, most of the crew returned to the ship, with only a few choosing to go home. Mike joked that he almost got to be captain. Chandler retorted that he could keep dreaming. Quincy's wife also decided to stay in Norfolk, becoming Chandler's neighbor to help look after the children. With the SEALs providing security, the family was safe. She touched Chandler's face, noting it was smoother than Quincy's. Chandler took a closer look and realized she was quite beautiful and sexy. The scene shifts to the evil scientist Soren, who was found and taken in by a cult-like group of immune individuals. The preacher of this group had gathered a number of naturally immune people, telling them they were the chosen ones and the world belonged to them. One day, the preacher told his subordinate that he heard a warship had created a cure and was flying scientists around the world to distribute it. The subordinate was skeptical, but Soren confirmed it was true as he was there at the time. The scene shifts to 5 months prior in the North Atlantic. The camera moves inside a Royal Navy submarine. Unfortunately, the submarine was hit by the virus, and all 90-plus officers and crew died from the disease in a gruesome manner. However, 2 crew members on board turned out to be immune to the virus, the brothers Sean and Ned. While aircraft were tasked with liberating the North, the missile destroyer was responsible for the South. Their plan was to first go to Savannah, then to Florida to meet with Dr. Scott's mentor. The ship's navigator, by reviewing the port director's log, discovered that a hospital ship had left Norfolk 2 weeks prior. They deduced that the ship had moved the equipment from the Norfolk base to escape the chaos. Dr. Scott noted that if this were true, the hospital ship could produce tens of thousands of doses of the cure daily. Now, the missile destroyer had suffered significant crew losses, so they recruited some military personnel in Norfolk. Lieutenant Green's Marine detachment had been hit hard, so he selected 2 formidable warriors who were in the U.S. for an exchange program before the pandemic. One was an Australian Navy Chief Officer, Taylor. He was a diver, an explosives expert, and proficient in operating various weapons systems, a man who could take out an enemy general amidst a million soldiers as if it were nothing. The other new recruit was a woman, Ravit, a lieutenant from the Israel Defense Forces. She was a composed and capable intelligence specialist. Tex was happy he could finally do less work. Burke was immediately smitten with Ravit and tried to flirt with her, but she didn't even acknowledge his juicy hormones. Following the route from the log, Chandler and his team found the hospital ship. However, there was no response to their radio calls, and the ship was stationary. Chandler decided to board. On the hospital ship, they split into 2 teams. At first, the ship was eerily empty, but soon they found people who had been shot and killed. Then, Tex's team discovered more bodies. Chandler's team found the only survivors, one of whom was critically wounded and undergoing surgery. The news was relayed back to the missile destroyer, and the entire crew went on high alert. The hospital ship's XO told Chandler that an armed group of over 10 men had boarded 20 minutes earlier, asking for the cure and then starting to kill people. Chandler replied that he had the cure and was there to deliver it. They had attacked the wrong ship. From her position, the sidekick girl found it strange because there were no other vessels visible around the hospital ship. Chandler and his team continued their search and soon encountered the enemy. Judging by the fact that the enemy's guns could shoot around corners, these were no ordinary opponents. The Scatterbrain and Taylor were paired up. Taylor's combat skills were off the charts, and together they easily dispatched their opponents. Ravit was also no ordinary soldier. While Tex and Burke were still figuring out how to clear out the enemy, Ravit walked right in, claiming to have the cure in her pocket and daring them to check. When they reached the lab, they saw the equipment had been destroyed by the militants. They were too late. Chandler then used the radio to inform everyone that the enemy was well equipped and highly trained, and they needed to retreat. So, who were these opponents? That's right, the leader was Ned. Ned was extremely arrogant, using the ship's PA system to taunt Chandler, saying that the U.S. Navy was garbage and he would annihilate them all today, ensuring no one made it back. Moments later, he was nearly annihilated by Chandler's team. However, Chandler's side wasn't unscathed. The hospital ship's XO was killed, Taylor took a bullet to the leg, and Burke took a bullet for Ravit, which thankfully hit his body armor. A furious Ned tried to blow up the ship, but the 2 bombs were disarmed by Ravit and Tex respectively. Ned then jumped into the sea and disappeared. The missile destroyer never detected any other vessels, though the sonar operator did pick up a fleeting signal that he believed was from a submarine. The surgeon, who was also an expert in genetic engineering, decided to stay on the missile destroyer to help produce the cure. Dr. Scott was happy to have someone to take over Quincy's work. They also captured a wounded and unconscious enemy combatant. That night, the preacher and his subordinate took Soren out to sea without telling him their destination. Soren asked where they were going. The preacher replied that someone wanted to see him, explaining that when they attacked the hospital ship, they encountered a warship that seemed to know their every move. Soren realized it must be Chandler and his crew and asked if they had been captured. The preacher's awkward expression expression gave him the answer, and Soren quickly clarified that he hadn't been the informant. Just then, a submarine surfaced. Soren was brought aboard the submarine. Sean welcomed him and explained that the men on his submarine were mercenaries recruited from Europe. They were a more diverse group, but they all had one thing in common. They were naturally immune to the virus. Ned clearly distrusted Soren, thinking he was a Russian spy and wanting to shoot him. Sean stopped him, saying he needed Soren for his work. Sean then asked Soren to provide information about the missile destroyer. Soren said he didn't know much, but the missile destroyer was small and agile, not large, but very powerful. The captain's name was Chandler, a very cunning man who had twice defeated the Russian Admiral Ruskov. Hearing this, Sean and Ned's expressions changed, and they accused Soren of lying. Soren said he wished it was a made-up story, but he was there at the time. He was the sole survivor from Ruskov's ship. The news of Ruskov's death delighted Sean and his men, which spoke volumes about how terrifying Ruskov was. Soren warned them that Chandler was even more formidable. Ned's confidence surged again, boasting that their astute-class submarine made Chandler's little rust bucket blind in comparison. The prisoner of war woke up and started talking before Mike could even question him. He said his name was Juan, a member of the Spanish Naval Special Forces, recruited just 2 weeks ago by a British Royal Navy astute-class submarine. He didn't know its designation or the commander's name. Everyone just called the man Commander, but he knew he was British and mentally unstable. Juan claimed he had no idea these people were murderers, or he never would have joined them. He then offered to join Mike's team. The sonar operator detected a very faint sound, which he confirmed was the submarine. Sean's sub also detected the missile destroyer, disguised as a fishing vessel, through their sonar. A naval battle was about to erupt. The submarine had the chance to strike first, but Sean wanted to get closer, hoping to rescue Juan. Ned argued that Juan was either dead or had turned traitor and asked why they were waiting. Sean insisted that Juan wouldn't betray them, as he was a man of faith. Fleeing wasn't an option. Chandler decided to confront the submarine head-on, ordering the ship into level 2 silent running and reducing speed to a minimum. The crew inside were forbidden to make a sound, even taking off their shoes. The dog lay still. The missile destroyer vanished from sonar. A furious Ned complained that his brother had missed their chance. Juan requested to go on deck for some air, coughing incessantly. After a sip of water, he began vomiting blood. Mike suspected Juan had swallowed a tracking device. Fearing their position was compromised, Chandler dispatched an anti-submarine helicopter, preparing for a one-for-one trade. Inside the sub, Sean couldn't find the missile destroyer. His brother was screaming in frustration. Sean decided to use active sonar to search, planning to attack within a minute of detection. The sub then found Chandler, and Chandler found the sub. They engaged in a head-to-head confrontation, launching torpedoes at each other almost simultaneously. In the end, neither hit their target. The torpedoes skimmed past the hulls of both vessels. Both sides were shaken. Sean was the first to back down, taking a risky dive into a sea trench, the submarine clanging as it scraped against the rock to evade the missile destroyer's attack and disappear. Dr. Scott removed a USB drive, not a tracking device, from Juan's abdomen. Meanwhile, Soren, using data from the hospital ship, found Dr. Scott's mentor's email and learned his lab was part of the regional laboratory network system. After a day of decryption, Alicia finally extracted several coordinates from the drive's documents, all corresponding to biological laboratories. Juan's request to go on deck wasn't to send a signal, but to jump overboard with the USB drive after the ship sank. Unfortunately, a kick to the stomach had ruptured his organs. While Mike and Chandler were wondering why the two brothers wanted lab coordinates, the radar suddenly detected a barrage of ballistic missiles being launched. The target wasn't the missile destroyer. Calculations showed the missiles were aimed at the biological labs scattered across America. Chandler immediately ordered missiles to be fired in interception, but it was too late. The submarine had launched 26 missiles, and they only managed to intercept 2. Juan did not survive. Through a blood test, Dr. Scott discovered that Juan was naturally immune. The proportion of immune individuals in the population was between 1% and 5%, much higher than her previous estimates. Chandler finally understood the mercenaries' goal: to destroy all the cures. The two brothers landed in Florida. Sean planned to recruit the 5% of the population who were immune to build his empire. Ned questioned if a mere slogan could fool them. Sean replied that it wasn't fooling them, it was God's will. Ned pointed out that they had destroyed all the labs in America, and their people had taken care of the 2 in Europe. Now, the only place that could produce the cure was that warship, so they should go back and sink it. Sean said they had to wait until the noise-dampening system was repaired. Ned was fixated on going home and had no interest in building an empire. He wanted to kill Soren, calling him a jinx who brought death wherever he went. Sean, however, liked this quality, saying that just by having Soren walk through a seafood market, they could eliminate a large number of people with high efficiency. Dr. Scott and Chandler disagreed on the next next course of action. Dr. Scott believed distributing the cure was the priority, while Chandler argued that finding the submarine was paramount. The sub had destroyed all known labs, including Granderson's. They had to eliminate the submarine first, but finding a sub in the ocean was like finding a needle in a haystack. Alicia downloaded a video file from the encrypted satellite sent by Dr. Scott's mentor just before he died. He explained that based on Dr. Scott's research, he was attempting to develop an inhalable version of the cure and had achieved preliminary success. Then, Dr. Scott's mentor was killed on camera. Chandler and his team finally understood how the submarine was able to target the lab so precisely. Dr. Scott said that if her mentor's research was successful, they could spread the cure's powder over large areas with planes, like crop dusting, eliminating the need to build labs everywhere. Therefore, they had to go to her mentor's lab to find his research data. Chandler disagreed, insisting the data was likely gone and that they must deal with the submarine first. Mike suspected the two brothers had accomplices on land who helped them find Dr. Scott's mentor so quickly. At Dr. Scott's repeated insistence, Chandler and his team went to her mentor's lab. As Chandler had predicted, the lab was completely destroyed, the computers were smashed, and they found no valuable data. Chandler prepared to pursue the attackers, but the Master Chief advised him not to act rashly and to return to the ship first. Chandler didn't listen. He sent the Master Chief back to the ship with Dr. Scott while he followed the tracks to find the murderers. The trail led into a swamp. Chandler called the ship and had them launch a drone. Thermal imaging revealed an area of human activity, likely the two brothers' base. Chandler led his men into the swamp, but it was just a civilian settlement with a few armed guards. Chandler saw someone using a radio speaking Italian, which he didn't understand, so he relayed the information to the missile destroyer. Chandler didn't act rashly. He had Tex pose as a survivor to acquire some clothes. Just then, the people in the settlement began to move out. Chandler decided to go in unarmed, splitting up to blend in with the evacuating crowd. On a truck, a woman started chatting with Chandler, telling him that a man named Sean said there were millions more people like them. When Chandler asked who Sean was, the woman gushed about how charismatic he was and asked if Chandler hadn't seen his videos. She said that even though Sean was European, he was just like them, and that Chandler was in for a treat as they were on their way to meet him. Dr. Scott knew her mentor's research direction, but not the specific methods. In a flash of inspiration, she got an idea from watching the cook's cooking techniques. So the cook stopped cooking and started mixing chemicals. Though he didn't understand any of it, he seemed to be on the verge of a breakthrough. The submarine's radio transmissions were encrypted, so the content was unknown, but the missile destroyer had roughly determined the sub's location. However, when they used active sonar, it wasn't a submarine, but a floating relay device. Mike decided that if they couldn't understand what the enemy was saying, they should just shut their smelly mouths up, and a single missile destroyed the relay. Ned's communication was cut off. On land, before reaching their destination, Taylor jumped off the truck with his gear to provide support from the perimeter. They successfully infiltrated the compound and recognized the preacher's voice as the same one that belonged to the man who killed Dr. Scott's mentor. They were in the right place. Then Sean began his speech, proclaiming that thousands more would be brought there to join them. From here, they would make the world hear their voice. He was a messenger sent by God, who had traveled thousands of miles from Europe to spread the gospel. Just then, Chandler saw Ned take the stage and quickly hid. Next, Sean announced that American affairs should be managed by Americans. He introduced the former U.S. Secretary of Housing, stating he was the 12th in the line of presidential succession and was now the President of the United States. He had the authority to form a cabinet, take control of the military, and declare to the world that America was back. The entire auditorium erupted, but Ned looked very unhappy. Sean, however, whispered to his brother not to worry, as he had a plan. Watching the tide of public opinion, Chandler felt a sense of unease. The scene was both familiar and yet something he had never truly witnessed before. It turned out that American democracy and freedom could be played this way. Following the speech, Chandler and his team gathered to discuss a plan. Intelligence specialist Ravitt noted that based on the president's body language and the way his two bodyguards were pressuring him, he seemed to be under duress. Chandler remarked that the presidency had indeed fallen to him and they needed to win him over, or they would have to follow Sean's orders. Ned had lost contact with the submarine and was losing his temper again. Annoyed, Sean sent his brother to check on a supply point just to get him out of the way. To get closer to support Chandler, Mike ordered the ship to sail into the mouth of the St. John's River, which was near the extraction point and would help them evade sonar. Tex and Lieutenant Green were assigned to help transport goods at a supply point, where Lieutenant Green spotted Soren mixing chemicals chemicals. Chandler observed the president for a long time and noticed he had the authority to command his two guards, concluding he had likely joined the two brothers willingly. Rabbit used a honey trap tactic to learn from a guard that the president would be moved that night, meaning Chandler's team had to act fast. With the cook's help, Dr. Scott's research on the inhalable cure was successful. The main ingredient was cornmeal. With the help of the crew, she built a device and began testing. On land, Chandler's team staged a bomb scare, which sent even the president's bodyguards running. Chandler and Burke staged a rescue scene, and Chandler managed to get into the leadership's room as the president's savior. Sean welcomed him warmly. Chandler played along, saying he was a huge fan of Sean's speech, but that their bodyguards were amateurs. The president, also playing his part, specifically requested Chandler join his team. When Sean asked about Chandler's background, Chandler fabricated a story about being a former bodyguard who, after hearing Sean's speech, realized he was one of the chosen ones. He passed Sean's test and became the president's bodyguard. Soren joined Tex and Lieutenant Green's transport team. The two were curious why Soren was with them. They soon arrived at a residential area. Soren opened the trunk, which was filled with stuffed animals. He felt that spreading the virus by himself was too slow, so he planned to put the virus strain into the toys and give them to unsuspecting children. This was the first batch, and he needed to test its effectiveness. Ned refused to participate in such a despicable act. Soren argued that if he delivered them himself, it would be impossible to tell if he or the toys were the source of infection. Ned looked for volunteers in the group, and Lieutenant Green stepped forward. Ned sent two of his men with him. After testing, Dr. Scott's inhalable cure worked, but its effective range was very limited, and it lost its potency too quickly. Chandler spoke with the president and found him to be both superstitious and an admirer of Sean. He was also annoyed by his recent public appearances. Chandler suggested the president get some fresh air outdoors to clear his mind. The president and his guards agreed. While the guards were clearing the area outside, Chandler signaled Burke and Rabbit to get ready. Meanwhile, Soren found Tex increasingly familiar. Just as Lieutenant Green spotted a child and told him to run, the two guards objected. Lieutenant Green had no choice but to take them out. At the same time, Soren remembered that Tex was one of Chandler's men. Just then, Lieutenant Green's gunshots rang out. Tex took Soren hostage and started to fight back. Ned was shot and fell, and Soren was also hit. Tex then picked up Lieutenant Green and headed for the extraction point. Mike and his crew were heading for the river mouth. The submarine detected them, and they detected the submarine. They were still far apart, and neither dared to fire. Ned wasn't dead. The bullet had grazed his face and ear. Just as Chandler and his team were about to leave the building, news of the ambush arrived. The guards announced they were moving the president to the submarine. Chandler pointed out a retreat route, and the guards obediently followed. Mike received Tex and Lieutenant Green's request for extraction, but the helicopter couldn't take off until they reached the river mouth. Burke and Rabbit arrived just in time to help Chandler eliminate all the guards. The president demanded to know what he was doing. Chandler identified himself as Commander Chandler of the U.S. Navy, telling him that Sean was a terrorist and that he should come with them. The president refused to go. Chandler stated they were there on a rescue mission and hoped for his cooperation. Sean re-established contact with the submarine and ordered it to sink the missile destroyer. With Taylor's help, Chandler's team broke through and headed for the extraction point. At that moment, the submarine began to target the missile destroyer. Just a second before locking on, the missile destroyer entered the river mouth and disappeared from sonar. The submarine's silencing system wasn't repaired, so it didn't dare to get closer. Mike then dispatched a helicopter and successfully extracted Chandler's team. The mission was a huge success, netting them a president and Soren, a buy-one-get-one-free deal. The president, however, remained defiant and kept struggling. Mike remarked that this president was difficult to manage. Chandler replied that given the circumstances, they would have to hold the president hostage. Chandler reviewed a video of the president's meetings at the White House and saw that the man did have some potential. The crew knew the president was on board but didn't know he was part of the cult. Therefore, they needed to turn the president before he lost all credibility. Mike showed the president a video, the first being the order given to Chandler by the previous acting president, and the second being the Secretary of the Navy's message about forming the secret lab network. Mike explained that they once thought developing the cure was the most complex part, but it turned out to be the easiest and least deadly part of the mission. Everything was just beginning. He then played the video of Dr. Scott's mentor being murdered. Mike noted that the killer's voice should sound familiar and explained that they bombed all the labs to rule the world, which was why Chandler had brought him here. They could only assume the president was not involved in any of this. Mike placed a USB drive on the table containing recordings of Dr. Scott's experiments and Chandler's combat command, telling the president to watch it, then left. He expected the president to watch it, but instead the president president pulled out his own USB drive and inserted it into the computer. It contained Sean's indoctrination videos, filled with talk of divine guidance, evolving the world, and fulfilling a mission. Mike felt the president was too deeply poisoned to be saved and decided they should just get whatever intel they could and, if he remained uncooperative, let him pass away. Chandler took a turn himself. The president insisted the video of the preacher killing people was fake, claiming Sean had told him they were great because of their beliefs and had no need to intimidate or destroy anyone. Chandler asked him to share how he came to be with Sean, as if to be converted himself. The president explained that the pandemic first broke out in the southern U.S. He had been sent by the previous president to establish safe zones and quarantine areas, but they quickly fell. Everyone died, including his wife and children. He had a breakdown and wandered aimlessly, heading to wherever the pandemic was worst, hoping to get infected himself. Then he met Sean's followers, who were peaceful and spoke of humanity, not violence. They were all naturally immune and shared a common faith, treating each other like brothers and sisters. They showed him the success of their mission in Europe, which rekindled his hope. The president argued that even if Sean himself wasn't perfect, his ideas would save the world. When Chandler asked how, the president explained their plan: to gather all immune individuals and cultivate a new human race immune to all viruses. Chandler pointed out this was a page from Hitler's book. The president countered that it was natural selection. Chandler argued the plan was flawed, asking what would happen to non-immune offspring. The president said that was out of their hands. They followed Darwin's law of the jungle. He noted that not everyone got on Noah's Ark in the Bible, and that even with a cure, it would be useless as the virus mutates quickly. Chandler informed him the virus had been engineered and hadn't mutated in a long time. The president scoffed, asking if Dr. Scott told him that, but he'd heard her doctorate was bought. Chandler then asked even if he was immune to this virus, what about others? The president proudly stated they had tested him, and he was immune to everything, a chosen one. When Chandler pressed for where such a massive undertaking would begin, the president revealed their next stop was New Orleans, which had excellent infrastructure, food, energy, and a hydroelectric dam. They planned to establish their nation there. Chandler remarked that it made sense, as sonar showed their submarine was already heading that way, no longer waiting for him. The president called his bluff, saying that was impossible. When Chandler asked why, the president refused to answer. Although the conversation didn't fully resolve things, it yielded useful information. Chandler and Mike analyzed the situation and concluded the submarine must be damaged and unable to move freely, which explained why it didn't pursue them. Superstitious people are usually driven by either immense desire or immense pain. Through observation, Chandler felt the president was the latter. During their chat, the president let slip that his son wasn't supposed to be there, then clammed up. Just then, Sean began a propaganda attack, broadcasting on a loop that the vaccine distributed by the missile destroyer was a new virus strain, and they were using civilians for bioweapon experiments, urging everyone to boycott the vaccine and the Navy. Chandler checked the data from the White House and discovered that the president had used his authority to fly his son from a high-risk area to the safe zone, and his son was the reason the safe zone fell. Chandler went to confront the president, only to find him in the bathroom having slit his wrists. Fortunately, he was found in time and saved. Chandler told him he knew everything. He said the president had joined the cult because he couldn't bear the guilt of tens of thousands dying due to his abuse of power, and he was using some nonsense theory of fate and survival of the fittest to numb himself. The president completely broke down, confessing that Chandler didn't know everything. After his daughter got sick, he had strangled her with his own hands to end her suffering. He asked what else he could believe in if not the cult. Chandler, moved, shared that he had also killed many people, most of whom deserved it, but some were innocent victims. He reminded the president of their government's actions in the Middle East. He believed that saving all innocent people now was their true path to redemption and invited the president to join his faith. The president was completely won over and revealed everything he knew. The submarine's noise dampening system was broken, making it incredibly loud and unable to move at speed. He didn't know many details, but handed over the cult's propaganda videos. Chandler had an office prepared for the president, who immediately got back into his role. As the saying goes, the good die young, but a scourge lives 1,000 years. This is no exaggeration. Soren didn't die. He even boasted about being like a cat with 9 lives. Chandler asked Dr. Scott to work with Soren on the inhalable cure. Dr. Scott was initially repulsed, but Chandler reminded her that he had ordered Soren to be saved, even though he was responsible for his wife's death, so she should be able to tolerate it. After some thought, Dr. Scott went to see Soren, who was was delighted to see her, saying he had been looking forward to meeting her every day. Dr. Scott acknowledged that, from a purely technical standpoint, he was a genius for managing to integrate his own DNA with the virus and controlling the insertion points so well. Soren demurred, claiming he hadn't intentionally spread the virus. Dr. Scott cut to the chase, explaining she had encountered some difficulties and needed his help. Soren agreed. She described the current challenge. The vaccine couldn't survive long in the air and quickly lost its potency. Soren, full of clever ideas, suggested using anthrax spores, which can survive in the environment for decades. Ultimately, they chose a type of freshwater mussel that carries bacterial spores. The president was still in a daze, unsure of what to do. Chandler sent the Master Chief to wake him up, telling him to use whatever philosophy, religion, or metaphysics he needed. The missile destroyer arrived near New Orleans first, preparing to ambush Sean's submarine. Dr. Scott reported to Chandler, asking for help in procuring some river mussels. Chandler's team found a freshwater lake near the coast on the map and set out. As for how to give the vaccine a spore-like shell, that required Soren's genetic engineering skills. Soren claimed he had forgotten and wouldn't say a word. Chandler led a team ashore. There, Burke was ambushed by a group of kids. The kids said they were looking for him, but Chandler had anticipated the kids' move and surrounded them from the outside, diffusing the crisis. Chandler sent a few men to catch mussels while he stayed behind to question the kids. The leading boy had a grown-up conversation with Chandler and was quickly won over. He explained that they were students at a seaside summer camp. When the pandemic broke out, they couldn't contact their parents, and their teachers fled, leaving them stranded. A few days ago, some people drove by, claiming the Navy was distributing poison. They gave the kids food and weapons, promising a big reward for capturing any Navy personnel. Chandler told them they had genuinely developed a cure, and that the others were a cult of naturally immune people who were fighting them. He offered to take the kids to a safer place if they helped him. The leading boy agreed. Chandler decided to lure the enemy out to capture some prisoners and get information about the cult. Rabbit, however, strongly objected to involving children in war. The mussels were caught and brought back to the ship for research. Dr. Scott continuously tried to coax the key technique out of Soren, but he wouldn't reveal it. While working with him, Dr. Scott was also studying Soren himself. There was no virus in his blood, it was all parasitic in his lungs. Using a bit of charm, Dr. Scott finally tricked Soren into revealing the crucial technique. With the leading boy's help, Chandler set up various traps and ambushes. As night fell, Chandler was about to send the boy away, but the boy sent a signal to the enemy. He hadn't betrayed them. He wanted to fight alongside them. An angry Chandler locked him in an RV. The cult members arrived, and the battle began. A message from the ship reported that the leading boy's right-hand man had also not boarded in order to follow the leading boy. Chandler rushed from his position to find the right-hand man, but unfortunately found only his body and was ambushed himself. The leading boy, having escaped the RV, arrived just in time to save Chandler and saw his deceased right-hand man. The battle was a complete victory, with 3 prisoners captured. Chandler reported to the president. They found 3 cell phones on the prisoners, but there was no signal in the area. The president had no idea what they were doing with signalless phones. After treatment from the Master Chief, the president began gesturing animatedly, talking about grand strategies and plans. Chandler could see he had been completely cured and was back to normal. Soren was becoming increasingly fond of Dr. Scott. Dr. Scott announced that their research was successful. Soren said the next step was to find a factory for mass production. Dr. Scott told him not to worry about it, as they no longer needed any of that. When Soren asked how the vaccine would be administered, Dr. Scott called him a fool, reminding him that he had spread the virus to billions just by breathing. So, using his method, she had designed a weakened, contagious vaccine that could survive in the lungs. She went on to say she had also studied his DNA insertion technique and used it in reverse to remove his own DNA from the virus in his body. Soren realized this meant he would be infected with the primordial strain. Dr. Scott confirmed it, explaining that the virus would leave his lungs and attack all his organs. At that moment, Soren's eyes began to bleed. He asked if she was mad, if she was using him as an experiment. Dr. Scott replied it was too late. The injection she had just given him was it. After killing Soren, Dr. Scott dissected his body. She was ruthless. Chandler had intended to find a place on shore for the kids, but the nearby safe zones had been infiltrated by the immunes, so it was safer to keep them on the ship for now. Mike reported Soren's sudden death to the newly returned Chandler, suspecting foul play. Chandler went to see Dr. Scott and asked about the vaccine's progress but said nothing else. Dr. Scott reported steady progress, unaffected by recent events. Mike questioned the prisoners about the cell phones, but they said nothing. As per protocol, the chief engineer was assigned to investigate Soren's death. Burke, who had been guarding the scene, said Dr. Scott had changed Soren's IV bag. After hearing the report, Chandler ordered a more thorough investigation. Dr. Scott told the surgeon about the new research direction, and the work progressed smoothly. The ship's various experts studied the 3 phones and found a quiz game app on them. The game could be played via a Bluetooth peer-to-peer connection and was encrypted. It would only display information if the correct password was entered. Coincidentally, one of the prisoners who wasn't very bright surrendered and cooperated. Mike also conducted a routine questioning of Dr. Scott, explaining it was standard procedure for a death on board and asking for her cooperation. The chief engineer found the IV bag Dr. Scott had swapped in the trash. Mike reported the investigation's progress to Chandler and the president. The president commented that the case was so obvious it didn't need an investigation. Chandler insisted that procedure must be followed. The surgeon was also suspected and questioned. Upset, he secretly accessed Dr. Scott's computer and discovered her plan. She had used a DNA restriction enzyme to kill Soren. The surgeon told her to hurry up with whatever she was planning, as they would likely interrogate and isolate her soon. Dr. Scott then ran back to the lab, quickly injected herself with the new vaccine, and breathed on a black mouse. News of Soren's murder spread throughout the ship. Most of the crew approved of the action, and even the Scatterbrain, who was on guard duty at the time, was hailed as a hero for punishing evil. The Master Chief reported this to Chandler, noting that the crew expected the leadership to turn a blind eye. Chandler summoned Dr. Scott. The brave sailor was reporting, requesting to strike the bell on time at noon. Chandler approved. He then asked Dr. Scott if she understood what the rules were, explaining that their continued success was due to their ironclad discipline. Dr. Scott asked why she was summoned. Chandler inquired about the vaccine's progress. Dr. Scott explained she had changed her research direction, using Soren's method to make their vaccine contagious. She had just used herself as a test subject. If the mouse didn't die, she could administer the vaccine mouth to mouth. The infected person could then infect others, acquiring immunity after just a mild cold. Chandler remained stone-faced and asked if she had killed Soren. Dr. Scott lost her composure, questioning why he was making such a big deal about killing a man who deserved it. Chandler told her that in life there are rules, etiquette, and propriety. As the saying goes, without rules, nothing can be accomplished. He explained that a bad soldier affects only himself, but a bad general ruins an entire army. Only when everyone knows he acts according to procedure and reason can they execute his orders instantly, without guessing or doubting. Dr. Scott asked which was more important, being right or following the rules. Chandler replied that whether something is right or wrong depends entirely on interpretation, and everyone's interpretation is different, which is why rules and regulations are established. Dr. Scott confessed that she could have spared him, but she wanted to cut out his lungs and use them to prepare the cure. Her only regret was that he died too quickly. Chandler sent a speedboat toward the coast, hoping to pick up a Bluetooth signal from the phones. The president also came to the bridge. Seeing the twinkling lights of the civilian boats in the bay, a peaceful scene, everyone was happy. Suddenly, the phone received a message. The prisoner had decrypted it, saying they were here. The message was relayed to the missile destroyer. Chandler immediately ordered a stop. The noise from the civilian boats was too loud for the sonar to detect anything. Then, the civilian boats began to explode, turning the sea into an inferno. The entire crew went to battle stations. 4 torpedoes were incoming, the submarine hiding among the civilian boats. Chandler didn't dare to fire back and ordered an emergency turn to evade. It was too late for torpedo decoys, so he had to use close-in weapon systems to fire at the sea surface as a distraction. After a series of maneuvers, they dodged 3 torpedoes. The 4th hit the port side. Thanks to plot armor, the hull didn't breach and the ship escaped into the river mouth. Just then, Sean called, taunting Chandler about the fireworks he had arranged. Chandler challenged him to a real fight, man to man, instead of sneaking around. Sean said he was waiting for the populace to rise up against him. At that moment, a Bluetooth connection request came through on the phone. It was a video showing Chandler's ship firing, followed by the civilian boats exploding, ending with a Valkyrie logo and a request for likes and shares. The video was clearly edited to reverse the sequence of events. Chandler remarked that they were 16 kilometers from the coast, and the Bluetooth signal was incredibly strong. The chief engineer said it must be the work of an expert who had hacked into the police system to pair with all phones, with a super strong signal that could likely be received nationwide. Chandler insisted they had to find the signal source, or they would be defeated without a single shot fired. The surgeon went to the lab to organize the equipment and saw that the black mouse was still alive, suggesting that Dr. Scott had succeeded. She went to report the news to Chandler, who was not happy. He said the whole world now saw them as the villains. If Soren men were alive, they would have had another witness. They had been losing the information war, and now he couldn't feel happy about any good news. Dr. Scott apologized. Chandler told her he wouldn't confine her anymore. She could work in the lab, but was not allowed in public areas. As a Navy commander, he had no authority to sentence her. Once they were ashore, he would hand her over to the judicial authorities. Dr. Scott replied that he should do whatever made him happy. Chandler said he was not happy. In the aftermath of the New Orleans harbor explosion, the sea was a scene of devastation, with countless dead and injured. The missile destroyer monitored numerous distress calls and rescue messages interspersed with curses aimed at the Navy. It was clear the rumor had taken hold. The missile destroyer's sonar was also damaged, and they could only deploy 2 sonar buoys for defense. They couldn't participate in the rescue efforts or find the submarine. They had to rely on Tex and the others who were already ashore to help the civilians, but the victims were not grateful. Lieutenant Green, analyzing the wreckage washed ashore, concluded that Sean must have attached mines to the boats beforehand and detonated them when Chandler's ship arrived. Then, Sean released another video. He identified himself as a Royal Navy lieutenant commander, reminding everyone that Britain was America's mother country. He claimed he had come to help as a family representative, but later discovered the virus was released by the U.S. military and that their government had done nothing right. He told people to watch the previous day's video as proof that the Navy was there to oppress them. He branded Chandler a demon who had kidnapped their president. He declared that where there is oppression, there is resistance, and he was there to uphold justice. He vowed not to rest until they sank the ship. Chandler asked Dr. Scott for the specifics of the new vaccine and whether the crew needed another dose. Dr. Scott confirmed they did, but its contagiousness only lasted 5 to 8 days, so they had to wait until they were certain they could go ashore. Next, Sean disseminated numerous so-called declassified documents, all altered from materials found in the labs. Chandler's secret mission to the Arctic was something even Chandler himself hadn't known about. After Sean's spin, Chandler's mission was twisted into a search for bioweapon materials. The president noted that Sean's followers were not very educated and that this Valkyrie was the key. When Chandler asked what he planned to do, the president said they should seize control of this network. Since Sean claimed he was kidnapped, he would make a public appearance to expose their vicious lies. He admitted he was no good with guns, but swaying public opinion and inciting the masses was his old trade. Due to the signal's incredible strength, Tex was able to pinpoint the source's direction just by testing its intensity. The navigator made a rough calculation, and a drone was sent to investigate, revealing an offshore oil rig. The president recorded a video, and Chandler set off with it. They boarded the rig easily. It was deserted, and they met no resistance. Suddenly, a young IT girl emerged, her bag bearing the Valkyrie logo. She was a computer science master's from MIT. She was the mastermind behind the phone network. But she wasn't an immune. She was just an idealistic young woman. Using her hacking skills, she had known about everything that happened in Egypt from the moment Chandler's team left for the Arctic. Discovering the government was hiding the truth, she created Valkyrie, a platform based on blockchain technology, solely to expose the truth. Her user base once exceeded 6 million. The videos she posted were all ones she had obtained herself. Chandler explained they had returned with a cure and that Sean wanted to destroy them so he could use the virus to slaughter ordinary people. The IT girl scoffed, saying she wasn't a fool. She was an independent and critical-thinking modern youth. Chandler offered her a top-secret video to watch and think about. The IT girl refused, declaring that no one in the U.S. government was good. Chandler told his men that if they couldn't use it, no one would, and ordered them to shut down the rig. At that moment, the smear video reached the survivors' phones on the coast. The prisoner took the opportunity to point out that they were the Navy who had blown up the boats yesterday. In an instant, the situation became tense. Lieutenant Green and his team quickly retreated. Tex took a bullet in the rear. A civilian speedboat approached the rig and fired an RPG. Engine room crew members were killed instantly. Chandler and Alicia were dazed by the blast. The IT girl escaped in the confusion. The speedboat fired another rocket. The rig started leaking natural gas. Fortunately, a helicopter arrived just in time and took out the speedboat. But the gas leak was too severe for the helicopter to land immediately. The team tried to shut off the valve but failed. The rig began to explode violently. Chandler and his team barely managed to escape. Their attackers weren't Sean's men, but ordinary civilians from the coast. Their skilled technician succumbed to his injuries and was gone from the show forever. Rabbit was also in critical condition, and Tex's behind was shot up. Chandler collapsed, and when he opened his body armor, he found a piece of shrapnel lodged in his abdomen. News reached the submarine. Ned told his brother that a coastal redneck and a drunkard with an RPG had blown the rig and the Navy sky high. Although the broadcast was also cut off, Sean was still pleased. The information war was working. At that moment, Sean was drafting a new ideological doctrine, more convinced than ever that the weapon of ideology was was invincible. A piece of shrapnel was embedded in Ravit's lower back. The surgeon said surgery was impossible, and Ravit also left them. Burke was heartbroken, destined to be unhappy for the rest of his life. Fortunately, Chandler was saved, but he had lost 4 more capable team members. Dr. Scott told Chandler that the shrapnel had shattered and wasn't fully removed. There were still a few pieces near his liver, which he could keep as a souvenir. The U.S. Navy had been attacked by its own people, and 3 had died in one go. Everyone was on the verge of breaking down. At this point, the Master Chief stepped up again, holding a memorial service and offering some potent words of wisdom. A chastened IT girl thanked Chandler for saving her sexy life. Chandler told her not to flatter herself. He had saved her not for her sexy body, but for her skills. The IT girl admitted she was confused and no longer trusted the truths she had uncovered herself. Chandler asked if she considered their current situation to be the truth, and if she would help him now. Chandler looked at the wound in his stomach, growing angrier the more he thought about it. He was constantly being ambushed with no way to fight back, a situation few could tolerate. The sonar buoys showed the submarine was still cruising around the mouth of the Mississippi River. The sidekick girl suggested hiding further upstream. Chandler refused, saying they were done hiding. They would use the complex delta waterways of the Mississippi to outflank Sean and fight a decisive battle. The IT girl chose to cooperate, bringing out her prized computer. Chandler informed the president of his decision to fight. The sonar wasn't repaired yet, so they could only rig a temporary one that couldn't run for long. This battle would be like a blind cat catching a live mouse, with grim odds. Chandler had the president, Dr. Scott, and the children moved to shore beforehand. The president argued that the shore wasn't safe either, but Chandler insisted that the ship was now the most dangerous place in the world. Now, not only was Sean looking for Chandler, but local civilians were too. The situation was dire. The IT girl connected to the quiz game app and discovered that civilians were collaborating with the Immunes to drive Chandler towards Sean's submarine. Mike asked if they could shut down the app. The IT girl explained that it was a blockchain. To shut it down, you'd have to turn off every single phone. It was designed that way to prevent people like them from tampering with it. Burke wanted to take on the civilians directly, but both the president and Chandler disagreed. The IT girl suggested that while they couldn't shut it down, they could spread false information. Chandler thought it was a solid idea. They could even lure the submarine into an ambush. Mike took a team ashore. For security, they couldn't contact the ship. The brilliant chief engineer, with help from the Master Chief, converted a depth sounder into a temporary sonar. Chandler had the IT girl use false information to draw the civilians elsewhere, planning to intercept the submarine midway for a one-on-one showdown. Sean fell for the trap, and everything was going according to Chandler's plan. What Chandler didn't know was that Sean had secretly positioned a rocket launcher on the coast. On the eve of the great battle, Chandler needed to test the sonar. Just turning it on caused the temperature to exceed 300 degrees. The moment it started pinging, the temperature would be even higher. The Master Chief yelled for ice. Mike's team was resting on the road when they suddenly saw an infected family of 3. Dr. Scott, against advice, rushed out, saying she could save them. The wife told her husband to put down his gun. Dr. Scott held the child, touching and breathing on them. The wife, impatient, told her to stop admiring the baby and get on with the cure. Dr. Scott assured her she was already doing it and that they were cured. After understanding the situation, the family expressed their gratitude. They said they thought Mike's team was with the Immunes, the same ones who had infected them with used blankets. Hearing that Mike's team was Navy, the wife mentioned she'd heard from some British Immunes that they were transporting something that could sink a warship to the coast. Unable to use the radio, Mike decided to go help Chandler eliminate the threat. Sean realized something was wrong, but the moment of battle had arrived. Chandler ordered the sonar to be briefly activated. The Master Chief frantically poured ice on it. In that single moment, the submarine heard the ping. Both the surface ship and the sub knew the other was nearby. The air was thick with tension. Only the ripples on the water's surface a reminder that time was still flowing. It was a test of a captain's intuition and luck. At that moment, Sean's submarine was directly beneath Chandler's. Just as Sean's sub dived into a deep trench to fire its torpedoes, Chandler also gave the order to fire. Chandler's blind shot, guided by what seemed like divine intervention, hit the submarine. The submarine also hit the missile destroyer. This time, it was a real breach. The armory was flooded, the missiles were useless, and only 4 rounds for the deck gun remained. Sean's submarine was also heavily damaged and leaking, forced to surface immediately. Mike found the rocket launcher and saw the smoking missile destroyer. It was too late for a warning. Mike's team engaged in a desperate 3-against-7 firefight. Sean's men were no pushovers. They were the submarine's elite. Lieutenant Green and Mike were both shot, but in the end, Mike's team won. Sean's submarine broke the surface, preparing to fire its torpedoes. Chandler, with only 4 shells left, didn't dare to fire recklessly. In the nick of time, Mike hit the submarine with the rocket launcher. 4 rockets plus 4 deck gun shells completely destroyed the submarine. Chandler and his crew had won. News of the victory spread and everyone was overjoyed. The family of 3 was recovering rapidly. The submarine sank to the bottom of the sea, taking Sean and his brother with it. Having lost its combat capability, the missile destroyer sailed up the Mississippi River into the heartland. Along the way, only the president was busy, constantly giving speeches and recording videos, using the airwaves and the Valkyrie network to calm the public, hoping to set the record straight and clear the Navy's name. The video of Dr. Scott curing the family of 3 was played on a loop. The president announced their plan. First, a stop in Vicksburg for a meet and greet to spread the vaccine, then on to Memphis, and finally to the port of St. Louis. The IT girl distributed phones to everyone with a special built-in communication app, which even showed a photo of the preacher of the cult group. Dr. Scott gave everyone a booster shot of the vaccine and explained how to use it. Basically, get close to people and engage in a lot of frictional breathing. The closer, the better. But the contagious period was only 5 to 8 days, and a person could only become contagious once, so they had to act fast. The preacher contacted the president, pledging to withdraw to Europe to fight to the end. They arrived in Vicksburg, but only about 100 people were there, hardly enough to make an impact. Tex disembarked at this stop. Don't forget, he was looking for his daughter. He and Chandler agreed to meet at the final destination. The IT girl tracked the cell phone signals, which did indeed go to Europe. Meanwhile, the preacher and his followers were driving a truck full of infected people toward Memphis. Tex arrived at his father-in-law's farm. His father-in-law had never met him. After introductions, they acknowledged each other. The father-in-law said his granddaughter had heard the broadcast and gone to Memphis. His daughter, Tex's wife, had been killed by intruders 3 months ago. Tex told his father-in-law that the broadcast was real, touched his face to pass on the cure, and then went to find his daughter. He stopped at a gas station to refuel and found there had been a shootout. Only 1 infected person was still alive. The man said he had been brought there by the preacher's group, who intended to use them to infect the people waiting for the Navy in Memphis. They encountered resistance while refueling, and he was wounded and left behind. Tex quickly relayed the news to Chandler. The IT girl wanted to use the network to warn people away from Memphis. Chandler said their credibility was already low, and they couldn't afford another misstep. He immediately dispatched ground teams and a helicopter. The helicopter was equipped with the only bit of aerosolized vaccine they had from the initial experiments, enough to cover about 2.6 square kilometers. The preacher and his group arrived in Memphis, all dressed in Navy uniforms. They pushed the sick toward the crowd that had gathered. Tex found his daughter, and they had a tearful reunion. Then, Lieutenant Green and his team arrived. Tex spotted the preacher in the crowd. His subordinate, with a wicked grin, pushed a patient forward, announcing they were the U.S. Navy, delivering a virus. The crowd panicked and scattered for their shitty lives. Lieutenant Green and his team sprang into action. The helicopter was still 5 minutes out. They neutralized several immunes and captured the preacher. With the plane not yet there, they couldn't let the crowd escape with the virus. Tex did his best to calm them. The helicopter finally arrived and sprayed the vaccine. Everyone was saved. Chandler's team had won a major victory. The preacher chose to surrender, agreeing to help Chandler and the president dismantle his organization. The final stop was just ahead. Whether they could turn the tide depended on this last effort. Fortunately, a large crowd had gathered in the square at the port of St. Louis to welcome them. The crew disembarked and began to mingle closely with the people. The vaccine spread along with hope, and everything was bathed in light and warmth. After a few months of rest, the president was officially sworn into office. After the inaugural ball, the president invited Chandler to become the chief of naval operations. Chandler pointed out he wasn't even an admiral. The president brushed it off, saying he himself had become president. He told Chandler that the country was full of warlords, and he should bring his family over and focus on helping him unify America. Chandler accepted. The crew gathered to enjoy a brief moment of joy and to remember their fallen comrades. Dr. Scott came to find Chandler and handed him the latest pandemic report. The next day, Dr. Scott would embark on a new journey to help fight the pandemic in various places. The president had pardoned her for the murder. Chandler told her that even without a pardon, all 204 people on the ship would have perjured themselves for her. Both Dr. Scott and Chandler were moved. At that moment, only a few words were needed to close the distance between them, but they chose restraint, deciding to prioritize their country and duty and deal with personal matters later. Their comrades sang joyful songs, and Lieutenant Green formally proposed to the sidekick girl. All the suffering seemed to be over. But suddenly a person burst in and shot Dr. Scott, killing her and ending Season 2. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.